Reddit users who have visited the UK. What was the biggest culture shock you experienced? The first time I went to Scotland I saw a newspaper lying around. First headline was exactly this: legless woman attacks cabin crew with leg prosthetics. He knew then and there that I was definitely in the UK. I'm from Austria, and it was the driving on the left side thing. It drove me crazy. Also, Brits are so nice. I accidentally ran into someone and they apologized. In Vienna you could get beat up for stumbling into someone. Did they say sorry or sorry? The first one is a genuine apology for being careless. The second translates as for fuck's sake. You absolute fuck nickel. Watch where you are going. Source: I'm British. I live in the UK. The biggest culture shock is that London really isn't like the rest of the country at all. It's more like a global, cosmopolitan city-state. Yet most people think of the UK as being London. What I hear from the Americans I know, the biggest shock to them mostly is our drinking culture. It's insane to them. The UK has a major culture of binge drinking, where we will in our millions get incredibly drunk every weekend. Also, a lot more people drunkenly fight than in America apparently. The only thing I found is people tended to walk everywhere I'd ask for directions and they'd be like, oh, it's just a quick stretch of the legs. It would be like 4 miles _o. I'm in London right now on vacation from California, so I can answer. Everything is so old. In York I stayed in a hostel that was in a historic building. I went to Bath and I touched everything and was amazed I was allowed to. People here are so calm about how old things are. In contrast, the attitude in the States tends to be more don't touch that. It's 200 years old and we need to preserve it for future generations. It really puts into perspective how young the US is. Also, how chilly it can get in summer. Chilly is like 5°C. It hasn't been much below about 12°C at night this summer. Most days it's been sweltering above 20°C, even getting as high as 35°C. It's been roasting. How wonderful the public transportation system is. From the tube to the buses and black cabs and the broad light rail, it made it so easy to get around. It was great. Also, how different pubs are from US bars. The pubs were so relaxed, friendly, quiet, and had great food. Most US bars are way too loud, too aggressive, and have crappy deep fried food. I know there are nicer ones, but then they tend to be a lot more expensive. I loved that there were all of these friendly neighborhood pubs where you could go, have a couple beers with friends, get some good food, and leave feeling more relaxed, rather than assaulted with noise and ouchiness. Maybe a bit of a different spin on this one. I'm from the UK, but I went to live in Japan for 3 months last year. They have British pubs everywhere, like a little show off of British culture. The novelty of it, right? Wrong, they're surprisingly accurate to what our pubs look like. Low lights, wood everywhere, that carpet, you know the one. Dingy and slightly green. Queues for beer. Cheap fish and chips that's been in the freezer, but sold at the pricing of a real restaurant. It's all surprisingly accurate, and Japanese people competing with us for the social etiquette of queuing and apologizing certainly helps. The only thing that baffles me and my British cowhawkers, when we went there, you could smoke inside. There was a smoking area. In a weird way we felt more like it, old Britain than we did at the regular spoons back home. I'm from Canada, and I was shocked that you could drink everywhere at any time. The biggest culture shock was going to a professional darts match in Newcastle. I don't think I've ever been more entertained in my life. When visiting the UK, I'm impressed with how many homes have beautiful gardens. Seems that the Brits love their gardens and spend considerable time cultivating and maintaining them. The Natural History Museum is not only free, but has top-notch exhibits including robotic dinosaurs. Coming from Canada, where you pay through the nose to see half-broken garbage at most museums, this was a very positive culture shock. I was so impressed that I actually felt that the free admission was borderline criminal and dropped £10 into the donation box. Back then that was worth over CAD and still cheaper than a typical Canadian museum. The binge drinking culture amongst people, aged 20 to 35 or so. I drink. And I get drunk sometimes. But over here it's really shocking. People just get so ridiculously drunk they can't even talk, let alone walk. A Saturday night out in the clubbing area of a big city is like some kind of war zone. Cars actually stop and crossings in the streets. I'm from Germany. Left-hand traffic. Obviously. Still having all these little shops on the first floor of houses. At least you see a ton of them in London. Tiny, claustrophobic houses. Separate cold and hot water taps in older places. By now I know the reason for them. But it still feels so utterly senseless. I guess you mean ground floor, since you're talking about the UK. For us the first floor is up the stairs. Been to London and Manchester. My first time I was surprised at how friendly everyone was, comparing Londoners to New Yorkers. For example, it's like they're from two different countries. Funnily enough in the UK, Londoners are notoriously considered less friendly than everyone else in the country. Everywhere else you say hi and smile to people you don't know. In London, heaven forbid you accidentally make eye contact with someone on the tube. American TV. We checked into our hotel, and I turned on the television, expecting to watch the BBC or something, and the first program I came to was a rerun of Frasier, apostrophe. In my opinion as a professional Englishman you can't go wrong with a bit of quality TV regardless of where it was made. Your country gave us Cheers, Seinfeld, The Equalizer, Frasier, The West Wing, and M.A.S.H. And of course the pinnacle of wonderful, exported US TV, Columbo. Fish and chips. Positive culture shock, but still culture shock. How much tradition is kept? Their breakfast beans also, no matter how much you expect it. Being on the left side of the road is always a super jarring experience. People crossing the road at a red light without even looking. And the fact that every other business is fast food, cash for gold or a book is. The walls in Northern Ireland from the Troubles. There was still a tension in some places and the police trucks are no joke. They are huge anti-riot vehicles. I've moved from Australia to the UK recently. It hasn't been a huge culture shock, but there have been a few things I've noticed. The UK has roundabouts, as Australia does. But there are no set rules on how they work in the UK. Some you have to keep changing lanes midway through to exit where you want. Some have a new lane which appears halfway through. Some are the same as us where there's the same number of lanes exiting the roundabout as there is entering so there isn't cluster /CK in the middle. Indicators while driving are apparently optional. People don't seem to travel far from their home. I've been doing some sightseeing, and I'm constantly met with wow you drove 3 hours to insert place name and drove back in the same day. All of the accents. When I go over from the US and visit my friend I always make her listen to people as we walk by / interact with them, so she can tell me what part of the UK they're from, based on their accent. I have a really hard time with some of them, and wasn't expecting such a huge range the first time I went over. Britain has hundreds of different accents, and then there are dialects and socialects on top differing based on regions. Two people from the south can sound very similar or completely different depending on which county they're from. I find accents absolutely fascinating, and love talking to people from different places, just to hear how differently they talk. I just recently moved to the UK. The biggest shock for me was the police. They are so polite, forgiving, and placid. In the US you can get shot for making a sudden movement, whereas in the UK you can push a cop in an argument and not even get arrested. I was watching a reality cop show last night where a guy got arrested for being drunk, running on the road, and then trying to fight the police when they intervened. After taking him back to the station the police officer got him a tea and some chocolate, and then told the camera person you can't judge people from the way they behave when they had a few pints. Definitely having over 2,000 years of history integrated into modern architecture. In London, Roman walls and the Tower of London are flanked by skyscrapers and high-rises. In Edinburgh, the castle in the centre is surrounded by metropolitan streets and lanes, with old structures integrated throughout. It's a surreal and awesome experience. The fact that Jaffa Cakes has been hidden from me for so long made me angry beyond words. I fucking love Jaffa Cakes. That people who come here to the UK find it weird. Went for 2 days a few weeks ago. The cameras everywhere. The village I was in even had a CCTV car driving around. Brit brother is watching. They didn't let me have a cup of tea with the Queen. That's only for citizens.